Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, once again joined by Zepsi. We both do some contract work for the HBAR Foundation, but we don't do these weekly updates in any official capacity. We're just coming to you personally to give you the latest in the Hedera ecosystem. Welcome back, Zep.
How's it going, Brandon?
It's going fantastic. We have had an amazing 3 weeks. I was on vacation for a while. I still tried to put out some content while I was gone, but this past few weeks has been absolutely incredible. But as always, none of this is financial advice. Use it for entertainment or educational purposes only. So yeah, again, the last few weeks has been really impressive. Just the amount of use cases, the scale of those use cases has been really great. But it gives me an opportunity to talk about this shirt. You guys have probably seen this shirt a bunch of times. It is the HODL cards. And one of my friends, he's a graphic designer. He designed these cards. He's actually at least a colonel in the XRP army, but he's also an Abrdn. We've been friends for a really long time, and he designed these cards. And then Man and Harmon saw these cards, and this is back, I think, in 2019. He saw these cards, and he's like, we need to make a shirt out of this. But not just that design. I want something for the back. And what it is, it says, and you rarely see this, but it says, the fifth card is an ace up our sleeve. And I'm sure at the time he explained what he meant by that, but I had forgotten. And I started to think, I'm like, hey, it sounds like cheating, right? So this past week, I asked him, what did you mean by having that fifth card? And he explained it. He said the fifth card represents endless use cases in all industries, not a one-trick pony, never knowing who or what will come to market in Hedera's truly public network. It's a perfect ace up our sleeve. And Zeb, this aligns exactly with what we're starting to see now. And it aligns with things that we've been saying for a long time. You know, I've said it, we always have another catalyst coming down the line. We always have another use case, value add use cases outside of speculation. And we certainly have a lot of HBAR that is hitting the market on a regular basis, from the DLC Science Foundation, from the HBAR Foundation, from Swirlds Labs, from themselves, from, you know, all the different entities that are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing with HBAR, building out the ecosystem, building out the network. But of course, that puts pressure on the market. But like what Manon said, there's always going to be something else coming down the line that's going to boost our ecosystem. And I think we're seeing that, and it's just going to get more exciting as we kind of go through that hockey stick moment of getting all the infrastructure in place so new and innovative use cases can hit the market. So what are your general thoughts on what seems like a really impressive pace of use cases, both in the amount and also the scale? What are your thoughts on that, Zep?
Well, I mean, Manning couldn't put it any better by saying the ace up our sleeve. So when you look at other networks, you look at VeChain, they've got to focus on supply chain. You look on some other networks, they're completely focused on payments. You look at others and it's IoT, and others and it's AI. And then you realize that Hedera has the functionality inherently, both through the Hedera smart contract service, but the Hedera consensus service and the Hedera token service, to really capture anything as it comes out. There's use cases, like Rob said many times before, that we haven't even fathomed yet, that will come to the market and we'll be there equipped to facilitate it. We're not a one-trick pony. And so when you look at what we've seen in the last weeks, we've seen obviously the stablecoin remittance with, massive global financial institutions. We've seen carbon emission in the car manufacturing with Hyundai. We go back to carbon emission supply chain tracking with Avery Dennison. And then we look at something like Neuron, drones tracking these flights. And you think, what is there we can't touch? And I think that really is a testament to that ace up our sleeve. And knowing that they're out there, knowing that they're building, knowing that we can get blindsided at any moment, like, of course, we saw this week, I think that's the most exciting prospect for us. And I really can't wait to see that ace pulled out more often.
Well, I think it's only going to continue. You mentioned Rob, and he had some great commentary around a lot of the things that have come out in the past few weeks. So let's get into Shark Bites. So, Rob, we had a little bit of a hiatus here. How have you been?
I've been really well. It's been a while, and so much going on, so much to talk about. So let's get into Shark Bites.
Yeah, let's get right into it. So we'll start off with a quick question from the community that maybe you can address directly. And then if you'd like, you can give your thoughts on some related news coming out of Fresh Supply Co. So getting back to the question, Square Root -1 said that Zepsi mentioned Mastercard wound down their own blockchain. He asks, really? Why would they, number one, build one for starters, and number two, decide to wind it down? He goes on to say, would there be any advantage to a credit card using a public versus a private chain. So what are your thoughts, Rob?
Yeah, those are great questions. So remember, enterprises move fairly slowly. Big enterprises like Mastercard have been testing blockchain technology for a number of years. Maybe 5-6 years ago, private permissioned blockchains were de rigueur. They were what corporates thought they needed to do with blockchain tech, which was, keep it private, manage the network, stay away from all that scary crypto stuff. And they have largely failed, in my view. Hyperledger Fabric is the kind of the private permission blockchain of choice. And while it's great technology, if you need a use case which requires some kind of distributed database, which, by the way, we've had for decades, the hard thing is managing a consortium. The hard thing is actually getting all those businesses onboarded inside the perimeter wire that is that private permission ledger. And then it's overkill. We've seen time and time again, it's overkill. Friends that I've got at Oracle said that they've struggled to bring to market, into production, Hyperledger and private permission blockchains. Most of the IBM blockchain ones, which are based on Hyperledger Fabric, all of those businesses have either migrated off of those chains or have actually gone to the wall. So if you look at projects like Everledger, it's a Hyperledger project. If you look at projects like TradeLens, which is the IBM blockchain one, WeTrade, I mean, there are many that have struggled commercially to make it viable on a private permission blockchain. It's not to say that there aren't very specific niche use cases where it can still work, but it's very hard to make it commercial, especially as a startup. So what Mastercard did with their provenance blockchain was, back in the day, think that it was actually a good idea to manage supply chains and then integrate it with their payment systems to enable more friction-free movement of value versus delivery of goods within supply chains. And that's what provenance did. Fresh Supply Company was the largest user of that provenance blockchain. And when Mastercard decided that that particular experiment was not core to their business, sometime last year, I believe, they chose to sunset that part of their business, the provenance blockchain, private permission blockchain, which will, I understand, complete next March. So it's still live, it's still got users, but they are slowly deciding how they're going to proceed post the sunsetting of that platform. Fresh Supply Company got ahead of the curve. They were the biggest user, production user. They need those conditional payment triggers that provenance provides. And they love, if you've ever listened to David Indiria's talk, they absolutely love Hedera and all the capability it brings, not just the technical capability, but the credibility of the governing council when they're talking to their own clients. It's a far easier go to market if you've got the might of the governing council behind you in terms of validating your technical decisions and selection.
Well, you talked about how it's difficult to put a consortium together. Well, Hedera's already done that and then some. Right?
Done it for you, right? They've already done it for you. They've provided a network for you. They've provided the best-in-class distributed ledger technology for you to build on. So it becomes a no-brainer when you start thinking about it like that. And the enterprises that I talk to day in, day out, because of the Hashgraph Association enterprise program that I'm running, get it. They get it straight away. This is the easiest of fish to be shot in the barrel, right? It's so easy to have that conversation. And then you can get onto the capability and then actually the use case. So you kind of deal with all of the network stuff very quickly. So what Fresh Supply Company are doing is using Hedera as a new layer, or a new network rather, but retaining all of the really good capability that they've built for their customers, their agricultural supply chain customers. The conditional payment triggering. So when we talk about integration with Mastercard, this is Fresh Supply Company using Hedera for the consensus service and the token service, but maintaining all of these payment triggers out into the Mastercard network, which is super cool, and it demonstrates to Mastercard how these payments can be initiated from platforms that use Hedera. Fresh Supply Company have also launched what they're referring to as their Continuity API. The Continuity API actually brings all of that Hedera goodness to the other users of Provenance as they start migrating themselves off of this sunset platform. So Fresh Supply, again, got ahead of the curve, recognized that there is a business in providing these services. They've developed the layer on top of Hedera, which enables them to do so. It's called Continuity. I understand it currently uses the Hedera consensus service, but very, very soon they'll be tokenizing things as well within that API. That's really cool. But the exciting stuff, and I'm sure David won't mind me talking about these things, is that they're building extensions which leverage Hedera's core capabilities. So things like asset management, the tokenization of assets on Ledger, the event-based triggering for those assets, so that an asset might be a cow in the supply chain, and the growth of that cow will trigger certain yield payments. Maybe you've got integration with the Mastercard payment gateway services, which comes with a lot of other capability that can be integrated with Hedera. And then there's some more exciting stuff that Mastercard have recently announced that potentially could be synergistic with Hedera as well. And we'll leave that for another day. But suffice to say, this is all going in the right direction. And integration of networks is what I believe Hedera is really good at, because the consensus service is, the Hedera network itself can be considered a layer zero. It can be a base layer that can be utilized for the cross interoperability between networks that sit on top of it. Think of it as a Web3 enterprise bus, in tech terms, something which provides that kind of interledger interoperability. And these are the sorts of things that Fresh Supply are actually enabling right now.
Exciting times. Looking forward. It is exciting times. Now, I was going to get David on this show, but I think his conversation needs to be a little bit longer form. So I'm going to try to get him into a Twitter space next week. So hopefully we can get that put together. Awesome. But, we've had some really impressive announcements beside that. We had Hyundai coming out. Of course, They're leveraging Hedera. We also had the highly anticipated launch of social media platform Calaxy. Which one of those would you like to tackle first?
Well, first, so let's talk about Hyundai. So Hyundai and Kia, one of the world's biggest car manufacturing companies, doing carbon dioxide emissions tracking within their supply chain. I've just mentioned use of HCS as a key enabler for a lot of use cases within the enterprise. I see it as kind of the gateway drug into Web3 for enterprise. Online notarization, shared data, regulatory reporting can all be done very, very easily, very, very quickly, and super cheap, and predictably cheap on the Hedera consensus service. So once they've got that level of integration, then actually the things that follow become a lot easier. The Hyundai use case does that. It's use of the HCS. I think we're going to see some other very, very big use cases that push HCS TPS over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, because they're very, very easy integrations. And each one actually validates and credentializes all the ones that follow. So it becomes, like I said earlier, with the governing council, it becomes a very easy conversation to have when you're actually pointing at these big enterprises and saying, well, this is how they use HCS for these use cases. How about for yours? So it's not Guardian. The Hyundai one is not directly related to Guardian because it's kind of capturing that kind of emissions reporting that they need to do as part of their ESG strategy. But the next step would naturally be kind of the tokenization of that into emissions tokens, which can then be accounted for against carbon credits that they buy with Guardian, which is how we like to sell this journey for enterprise. So that's super exciting. Calaxy, I couldn't be more happy. It's been a long time coming. I think 3 years. Solo and Spencer, and that entire team. Some people from the Hedera ecosystem that like Cooper and Paul, that we know and love, and have since moved on to other things, have all been part of that journey. I think, like you, I was part of the beta, so I was kind of really enjoying the interaction. I don't see any reason to stay on Twitter or X now with Calaxy. Calaxy there, it's way too noisy, and I don't really like the user experience. So I'll spend a lot more time in Calaxy. I might be posting some shark photos. I'm just trying to work out how to interact with the community there, because it's kind of a different experience. It's this combination, this convergence of Web3 and NFTs and payments and social media. So I'm really excited to see how that will develop and pan out over time. It's just such a beautiful UX. They put obviously a lot of time and effort into the user experience. And find me on Calaxy as Sharky Rob.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed, of course, from a marketing perspective, getting to new audience, I still have to leverage X in some ways. But in a lot of ways, Calaxy has leapfrogged what X is doing, what they aspire to do with X. Calaxy's already doing with payments and things like that. So it really has so much potential. We just got to get people using it, right?
Yeah. And I'll stay on X for a little while. It's amusing, but I won't be burning any time there. There's the odd troll that needs to be dealt with, but apart from that, it'll be Calaxy all the way.
Sure, that's fair. So finally, let's get into some payments. We've had some really great developments in this arena as well. What's your take on both the success of the Shinhan Bank pilot and Dropp showing up on the FedNow website?
Yes, that blindsided us all, I think. Let's deal with Shinhan first. This is all in the public domain now because of the webinar that happened last week, so we can talk about it. I've been itching to talk about this for weeks and weeks. And all credit to Sabrina and Alice at the foundation for for pushing this through over the last few months. So for those who haven't watched the webinar, it's a pilot between 3 financial institutions. So we've got, I've got to make sure I name the right ones and don't name the ones that have not named themselves. So Shinhan, obviously, in Korea, governing council member. We've got the technology organization that supports Siam Bank in Thailand, and we've got the biggest financial institution in Taiwan. The webinar also included Standard Bank, obviously another governing council member who participated in the first proof of concept, so 2 POCs back to back. The really exciting thing for me about this particular project is that we had them utilize the Swirls Labs stablecoin accelerator. So I've mentioned this before on Shark Bites, where Greg Scallard and his team at Swirls Labs have created this soon-to-be open-sourced tech stack, which enables out-of-the-box stablecoins to be created using a hybrid model with the Hedera token service and the Hedera smart contract service as kind of a administrative wrapper that enables kind of SOC 2 compliance. It also creates all the hooks that enable custody and transactional reporting and fraud management and audits and all those things that banks need really to be able to issue. It's a real, in the true sense of the word accelerator, it will enable all of these things. So I'm super excited about how we can now leverage this pilot, and there will be some big announcements coming up over the course of the next month, which we'll get into after the fact. But the bottom line is that this pilot, which does the remittance use case, so it enables someone, a customer of bank in Thailand can send money to a friend or a family member in Taiwan or in Korea very, very quickly. In the matter of seconds. And that's done through use of the stablecoin accelerator and two main smart contracts, a remittance smart contract and an FX one. So it's got the foreign exchange element, which is managed by the banks themselves. And then you've got this kind of routing smart contract that sends money from one side to the other via a common coin, a remit coin. And in this case, it was a kind of a US dollar backed stable coin that provided the common currency. And then they managed balanced pools at each end. So it's really, really efficient. And, one could see adding more and more banks or issuing organizations into that network very easily, onboarding themselves, using the stablecoin accelerator, and then quickly sending money over that network. But that's just one use case, of course, because once we've got the stablecoin accelerator issued by banks, then it opens up all of that micropayments goodness that Hedera enables. And a stablecoin issued on Hedera.
It's what we've talked about so many times.
And here we go.
It's getting that infrastructure in place. And once you have that in place, so much can be built.
Yeah. And the stablecoin accelerator code has been in the build stage for nearly a year, I think. I might be a little less than that. But it's been done properly. We've invested as an ecosystem in this tech because it's a key element. Stablecoin isn't a use case. It's a capability. It's a product that can be taken to market. And so then we've got micropayments. And so, talking to banks who are in jurisdictions where, stable coins are allowed within the regulatory environment, we now have the ability to actually not only sell stable coins for, big institutional interbank type transactions, but more so at the retail level. And I think we'll find a lot more experimentation and discovery because this capability is entirely new in the Web3 space because only Hedera can do it properly. And so we're seeing Dropp and the announcement on the FedNow showcase website just this week as an example of that. They provide this, they expose this Hedera capability through their business that enables micropayments. And in the old days, micropayments was not commercially viable because the old payments rails, the unit cost of payments was very high. I think Mastercard going back to Mastercard think of micropayments as anything under $10. So buying a coffee is a micropayment. In my head, anything under $1, even under 10 cents, can be commercially viable on Hedera. Maybe less, depending on the number of services you kind of build on top. And that's entirely based on the use case that you're addressing. So, what Dropp are doing is really the natural extension of all of the work that's preceded, the work that Hedera and the ecosystem have been doing for years. Goes all the way back to the daily timestamp that we, all the OGs were playing with back in 2018 or 19. And I love to see it. These things happen at a pace which cannot break away from the pack. You can lead the pack, but in corporate and regulatory and enterprise environments, you can stay ahead. But if you get too far ahead, you're too early, and you can't make get the market fit. But wherever you look at the moment, you see these emerging innovations. Which, if you just join the dots, it's a fantastic new world that we've been preaching for years, and it's now emerging. Super exciting.
It's starting to get here at this point. So, Rob, we hit some of the highlights here, but it's been 3 weeks. I'm sure there's some other stuff that you might want to cover. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on?
Just one thing. So the Hashgraph Association announced a couple of weeks ago the BBY, which stands for the Bharat Blockchain Yatra. In English, that's the Indian Blockchain Tour. So the Hashgraph Association, and this is a big deal, right? And we talk a lot about, the use cases and everything. But India is the most populous country on the planet. They're hugely technically literate, and as we know, there are massive companies in India servicing the IT industry globally. So the Bharat Blockchain Yatra is a 7-month tour that's going across, I think, 18 states. It's government backed. And the Hashgraph Association is the lead sponsor. So we are running events and hackathons, and we're going to touch, I think, something like 50,000 developers, 50,000 new developers in India over the next 6 months, and we're going to be training them on use of Hedera. We're going to be offering hackathon prizes. There are 3 massive hackathon prizes at the end of the tour of $750,000. Right, so that's going to attract some very, very big use cases. Those teams are going to be invited to Switzerland. They're going to be working with our engineering team. So, this is a really big deal. 25 events over the next sort of 6 months across all these different 18 states. We're partnering with an organization called IDS, who are one of the biggest systems integrators in India, and the government. So Hedera is going to be splashed across, as the major sponsor, as the premium sponsor, is going to be splashed across all of these events. It's buckle up and expect some incredible innovation, I think, to come out of the next few months. So, when on your feeds you see, Bharat Blockchain Yatra, don't ignore it, because it's one of the biggest deals in Web3, I think, on the planet, and Hedera's in pole position.
Well, when you have 50,000 developers working with the same technology, the potential coming out of that really can't be overstated. It's really incredible.
Well, that's 50,000 over the next 6 months we're expecting to kind of expose. So IDS have a contract with the Indian government between now and, I think, this may be wrong, but the end of the decade, so 2030, it might be earlier than that, to train 500,000 developers in Web3 technology, and the Hashgraph Association are their major partner in this. So 50,000 is just the first step. 500,000 new Hedera-based developers would be amazing. But it's happening, as they say.
Well, absolutely incredible. Rob, it's been great catching up with you, and I can't wait to get into conversations in the week to come, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thanks, Brandon. Take care.
So, of course, there was great coverage there by Rob on all these different topics, but I do want to cover some of these things and get some of your thoughts as well. Just to cover the Hyundai use case, Hyundai is using Hedera for their SCEMS, or Supplier CO2 Emissions Monitoring System. It's designed to compute carbon emissions at every stage of the supply chain, enabling Hyundai Motors and Kia to secure reliable data across its suppliers' business operations, including procurement of raw materials, the manufacturing process, and product transportation. So it's not the car emissions, but the supply chain, but I'm sure they're going to start to look at car emissions as well. So Zeb, this was a few weeks ago, but what were your thoughts on what came out of Hyundai and Kia?
Well, I think, as we've seen time and time again, every single organization in the world has to be very, very aware, hyper aware of its carbon emission. They've got to locate the pain points within their company, work out how they can make them more efficient, so that they are meeting ESG demands of both other organizations, but also stakeholders and future stakeholders that want to invest. And clearly, for a car manufacturer, one of the most intensive parts of that is the supply chain. As the company itself, where throughout their supply chain are they emitting the most carbon, and where can they really reduce that? And so I think to be able to give them this sort of granular level of sort of traceability of what is going on in that supply chain, enabling that granular level of that carbon emission data completely immutably, and be able to report that back to the people that are in charge of that, supply chain, report that to the stakeholders and so on and so forth, so that they can actively work on solutions to reduce that. I think that is obviously the very start of what they need to do. It's amazing that they've chosen us for that. And then I think later on down the line, that's when we can see sort of the Guardian integration, like Rob said, where they can really act on that to then reduce that through whether that's carbon offsetting, whether that's genuinely physically making physical changes in the supply chain. But either way, having us as that notary service to be able to show what's going on, and then maybe down the line actually offset that on Hedera again. So the start of what could be a very big use case, I imagine.
Oh, it's super exciting. And of course, it's another supply chain thing. The other big news we had, was, of course, was around Dropp and being featured on FedNow. And kind of putting those two things together, payments and supply chain, is Fresh Supply Co. and what they're doing around the sunsetting of the MasterCard Provenance program. I know that Rob covered it fairly well so far, but did you have any thoughts on that?
I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, to try and not echo everything that Rob said, I think for me was seeing that MasterCard gave David and Darius this task, which was making sure that legacy users of MasterCard provenance could find another blockchain and move as easily as possible, i.e., continue the continuity aspect of that name in the API, so that it's sort of drag and drop. The fact that they entasked David, the fact that David showed them Hedera, the fact they agreed on that and let Hedera, or rather David, spearhead this strategy, I think that shows multiple levels of trust. A, in the capability of David and Fresh Supply Co., and B, in the robustness of Hedera and the hash graph. And I think getting that sort of approval that what was their biggest blockchain project has now got that green flag to really migrate to Hedera is the biggest cause for celebration for us, and hopefully the start of a long and prosperous relationship, both with David but also with MasterCard.
Well, I think the other thing of note, both with Hyundai and with the Fresh Supply Co. working alongside MasterCard, is these aren't council members. Like, a lot of times people are like, well, they're council members. Of course they're going to be doing something with Hedera. But these are huge enterprises that are doing things with Hedera, alongside Hedera, that have nothing to do with the council. So they're coming to Hedera just because it offers some of the best solutions.
Definitely. I mean, I think that is one of the biggest flexes that our council has. When you have the biggest organizations in the world, they're not just lone wolves a lot of the time. They have all worked in different places before. They've all got their own networks of contacts across the board, friends, whatever it might be, former colleagues that they can talk to and say, we're doing this interesting thing. We think we need to be hyper aware of it. You should probably have a look as well. We've got this perfect setup that's been tried and tested before. Come and join us. We can hold your hand through it. And then the next thing you've got the biggest financial institution in Taiwan also with us. And, you've got the Hyundais and so on and so forth. So I'm sure that sort of network effect of our council members is really in its nascency. And again, we'll see more of that.
Yeah, well, this enterprise use cases, they're certainly exciting, but let's get into sports a little bit, because congratulations is in order. You have your team in the finals, right?
Don't curse me, Brandon. We've got to the finals, I think got to the semis, the quarters, and the finals of like all the most recent grand exhibitions of football. And we're finally in the finals again with the Lionesses. Shout out to our amazing women's team. But the most exciting thing about that, actually, and the most exciting thing is they're there. Second most exciting thing is that we've got this FIFA licensed blockchain game on Hedera. So play to own the zone. It's called Play OTZ. And actually this week we saw the FIFA Women's World Cup, which have, over 1 million followers on Twitter, directly shout out that platform, saying, have you signed up to this game yet? Have you hedged your bet on who you're going to win, etc., etc. That started off in the Males World Cup, but it was something that came out very quickly. It wasn't quite robust enough to have met that deadline, but they've been working on it since, and now it is off the ground. It's got a lot more users on it. We've seen the NFTs go up. We can see them on mainnet. Seen a lot more accounts come in, which I imagine can be contributed to that. But I will be using that platform to make my bets in the finals.
Exciting. So, Zeb, the next thing that I want to get into is Abrdn, one of our governing council members, and they put out a mid-year report, a progress report entitled Expanding Our Alternative Capabilities. And they open up by saying, at Abrdn, we have a clear vision of a digital future. We recognize that new technologies will change the way we invest, revolutionizing the investment landscape and make investing accessible to a broader audience. At the core of this transformation is distributed ledger technology, an effective method of recording ownership details in a decentralized computer network. We believe that in the next decade, nearly all investments will come to be represented as digital assets using DLT. This advancement could bring numerous advantages, including faster, safer, and more cost-effective on-chain trading and settlement, enhanced efficiency in private markets, and the fragmentation of assets into less expensive units. So they're absolutely speaking our language here, Zep. And further on down the line in this paper, they do highlight Hedera. As a forward-thinking investment company, we are committed to redefining the industry standards. For example, and then they highlight Archax, but I'm going to skip down to Hedera. We're the first asset manager to join the governing council of this cutting-edge DLT firm. Hedera pioneer enterprise-grade technology, enabling seamless migration of traditional investments into DLT. Hedera's technology is playing an important role in our tokenization and digitization journey. As such, we felt it was important to have a governance role in the business, and our on-premises node is now live, helping operate the network. So Zeb, what are your thoughts on what we're seeing come out of Abrdn?
There's multiple things that I find very refreshing about Abrdn. I think firstly, as a legacy institution, one of these behemoths in the finance world, you'd expect them to be very slow moving. But we've seen time and time again that they're very nimble. They're outspoken about their support from Hedera. They're one of our most vocal council members now, constantly doubling down on our tech, constantly doubling down on the hash graph, and then even outsourcing, or taking on companies like Archax, where they, realize perhaps that they won't be able to move as quickly as a company like this, but rather if we help fund them and work with them to, extend our principles and realize our goals, that's probably one of the best plays. And so I'm loving this relationship I'm seeing between Abrdn and Archax. And of course, having Hedera as the base layer through that, I think is exceptional. And can't wait to see more and more funds of theirs tokenized on Hedera.
No question about that. And you wanted to highlight somebody on the other side of the world. There's been a focus on Taiwan as well, right?
So we saw, as part of the most recent stablecoin remittance test, we saw the biggest financial institution in Taiwan, who is yet to be named, I don't know if they will be, come out with, again, Shinhan Bank, the oldest bank in South Korea, to create this international remittance stablecoin. Getting that deep dive that we saw, that sort of spotlight from the BD perspective, I think it highlighted a lot of things for me. On the base layer, it highlighted how interested these institutions are with us, pre-regulation. There seems to be this element of, they're waiting for that regulatory clarity so that they can onboard, onto the mainnet properly. Great to get that behind the scenes input. But I think for me, also seeing the time and effort that goes into any project like this, both from all organizations, whether that's the Hedera Governing Council, whether that's the Foundation's business development team, and whether that's the Swirls Labs, tech team. I think often in the community, there's sometimes this feeling, of, what are they doing? Why haven't we seen things on mainnet? This kind of thing, which of course in the last 3 weeks has sort of been blown out the water. But, when the market's a bit deader and everyone's a bit, a bit more angsty, those kind of things come to the surface. And I think it's so important for us to see just how much effort goes into anything, especially something like this, where you have multiple financial giants and multiple organizations working together. I think for me, as just to appreciate what goes on all the organizations, I thought that was a great thing. And of course, again, to re-highlight the caliber of institutions we have was the second point for me there. So all round, just great to get that insight.
Yeah, no question about that. And we're going to continue our world tour. We have Emtech, and they provide solutions to central banks for CBDCs. They work mainly in Africa and the Caribbean, but I'm sure they're going to expand beyond that. And the main piece of news around Emtech is they raised $4 million. I love to see this. There's certainly the resources that come from the sales of HBAR, from all the entities that we talked about before. But the fact that we have teams that are raising money in venture capital is really important. Let's bring some of the capital in from outside the ecosystem as well. But I also have some fantastic clips. We're going to do one of our famous hard left turns here. We're going to get into Calaxy because they are one of the most highly anticipated applications on the Hedera network, and they just launched in the past couple of weeks. So check out what Solo had to say. He is their CEO and has been with us from the very beginning. Welcome back, Solo.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, first off, congratulations. I've played around with the Calaxy app. It's intuitive, it's easy to use, but I'm just scratching the surface of the features that you guys are going to have available. But to start off, from your perspective, can you tell us how the launch of the Calaxy social media platform has gone thus far?
It's gone off really well. We're super excited, to be honest, to be met with such love from the community. I feel like the bear markets are really tough to look forward to, or at least finding things to look forward to. And I feel like Calaxy was one of those things that were so properly timed. Even outside of the state of the current world of social media, I think Hedera really needed something like that brought us together. And so, it's super exciting. It's going to be a continued process about onboarding more users, expanding outside the Hedera echo chamber, and branching out to other Web3 communities, but then also activating our creators to be able to go out and sell their experiences to their audiences and equipping them to do so. So it's going to be a continued slow burn, but we're super excited to continue growing in the right direction. But it's been fantastic to be out.
Yeah, well, it certainly started off with a bang. We were talking a little bit beforehand. The HBAR community has just really embraced it. And I think that it speaks to the way the app is used. It's just really easy to use right off the bat. But like I said, I've just scratched the surface of the features that you have. I've mainly been using it similar to the way that I use Twitter, but that's just the beginning. Can you run us through the features on the platform and how you envision it being used?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the user journeys for our platform are quite vast, from traditional Web 2 ones to entirely new behaviors that have never been seen in a community or social environment, right? And so I think you have this weird paradigm shift where there are going to be a lot of people who use it as a means of connecting to their audience. But I would honestly say that while people have compared it a lot to Twitter, there is no reposting functionality. And we've thought a lot about it, but if you really think about what Calaxy is, it's kind of more like Reddit and Twitter combined, where it's a lot of communities. And so I think, the feature sets are going to be really exciting because, it allows content creators like yourself actually to be able to connect with their fan base, monetize those experiences. And so from feature set, it's traditional Web 2 stuff all the way to marketplace functionality. So you're able to sell those experiences like video calls, like we're having right now, video messages, exclusive content, NFTs, custom experiences where you can actually take the video call feature and offer a cooking class and brand it how you would want and have it as like a big shop icon on your profile page, because a lot of that space is dedicated to, the real estate of that is dedicated to commerce. And so there are so many different monetization features. On the other side of it, you could actually have like a minimum threshold price where you're accepting custom requests for whatever it might be. So the possibilities are virtually endless. But I think what's super exciting are the social network type features, because Calaxy is not really a social media app. It's more of a social network. And I know a lot of people may think it's weird when I say that, but when you think about a social network, it literally just connects people to people, which is very reminiscent of the idea of a peer-to-peer network, which connects people to people. Whereas when you're in this paradigm shift of social media, where it's a traditional media and advertising, those guys come into the ecosystem, the incentives are all thrown off, and the place is just very different feeling. Whereas like Calaxy, it really feels like there's a board on the wall and people write something as a post, and everyone sits in the comment section around in a circle, and we all talk about how we feel about said post. And I think what that does is it brings another level of intimacy to social media that doesn't really exist, especially with a community like ours where people are so collaborative. It just increases all the possibilities and the expansion of the toolkit. And I know this is a super long answer, but we're super excited to expand the toolkit and features to allow even more community building and things like that.
Well, you really should be excited. Now, I'm just kind of dipping my toe in, and I think that's how people are generally using it right now. They're just getting started. But, what about the platform has you most excited in the months to come? And that could be features, that could be the creators that are going to be coming on board. The floor's yours.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm excited for the upside, like the Black Swan events, right? Like we've had some creators that came in with like noticeable followings or large followings just come into the app because they heard about it. They applied to be a creator. We've never even talked to them. We saw their credentials, and we were like, it really makes sense for them to be prioritized as like one of these creators who get access to these tools. And they set up their own shop and now offering experiences on their own. We never had to talk to them. It's that intuitive to use. And so I'm super excited about that possibility. And, one day if somebody like Justin Bieber or someone from his team shows up to the app and they're like, I want to do this, and all of a sudden we have somebody like that, we're now exposed to that event just because we have been building and developing for such some time now. In terms of other things, features, like I think it's been really cool in real time to see what people want. I've done a lot of questioning in the app and I run a lot of polls just to see how people are feeling about it. But a lot of them are, super excited about the Web 2 features in addition to the Web 3 features, despite it being a lot of, crypto HUDs in there early. So it's, super exciting. But yeah, I mean, send crypto through DM is going to be the most exciting one. I feel like it just screams like Lightning Network, like the social money, Venmo, Zelle, like how can we popularize crypto being sent from person to person. And so that's a feature that I'm super excited because like I said, in the social network space and with what everyone's trying to accomplish, the Everything app or X or Twitter or whatever it is, I'm super excited about that feature rolling out and seeing how it can financially connect people in ways that we haven't in our space.
Solo, I appreciate you on short notice coming on here today and telling us about it. It's been great to play around with it so far. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I think, Galaxy went above and beyond expectations. We've been waiting for them for a while, but I think it's been well worth the wait. To finally have one of these real hands-on retail applications that isn't DeFi, that isn't NFTs, just solely, to be able to get an entire new experience within the Hedera community, I think it's such a breath of fresh air, but also for that experience to be of the highest caliber. The user experience itself is comparable with the biggest social media apps, if not more so. I think X at the moment is going through a very weird growth pain stage, and I'm not particularly enjoying it at all. And I think that actually presents a perfect opportunity for Calaxy. More and more people are becoming disenfranchised with X. People tried out Threads with Facebook, and the data side of that, just how much they were rinsing the user for it, really freaked people out immediately. I think we're at the perfect time for an application like Calaxy, Web3 railed social media, Web3 railed creator economy to take off. And I think to see how many HBAR barons are active and on there is a testament to how strong our community is, but how strong that demand is on the whole. And I'd like to see it start off with the HBAR barons, and then as the creators come in, we'll have more Web2 users. And then I'd like to see when they start integrating other chains, NFTs, this kind of thing, other people come from other chains, and really for it to become a hub for the entire Web3 creator economy, the entire Web2 creator economy, and to see all of these worlds come together and have Calaxy at sort of the focal point of that.
What I love to see, and I talked a fair amount about Calaxy with Rob already, but what I love to see is the Hedera ecosystem from 2 years ago to where we are now. It's just night and day. We have so many more applications that we can actually get our hands on and allow us to interact with the real world. We have Karate Combat, we have Own the Zone, which we talked about, we have Road Code, we have Calaxy now, and it's just increasing. Again, that hockey stick moment of things we can interact with, and it only takes a couple to really hit it big, and I think Calaxy certainly has the possibility of doing that. All right, so the biggest story probably from this week was Dropp, our premier micropayments platform, getting featured by FedNow. And I don't want to put too many words in anybody's mouth, so I'm going to let the CEO of Dropp, Sushil, run through it for us. So here's Sushil. Sushil, I think it's fair to say that the Hedera community was blindsided by the inclusion of Dropp on the FedNow website, and there's a fair amount of confusion. Can you explain to us what it means for FedNow to showcase Dropp?
Absolutely. And I can understand if they were blindsided. So as you understand, Brandon, Dropp is a micropayment platform, an extremely cost-effective platform that was built on Hedera Hashgraph distributed ledger, but we also use regulated banking technology to make this payment platform happen, right? So that you can make payments in Web3 digital currencies, and you can also make payments in fiat, specifically currently US dollar, USD, right? So what's happening in the world in general, and some part of our vision is driven by the global emergence of real-time payments by the banking industry. In Brazil, you have PIX. In India, they have UPI, which has become very, very popular and become de facto standard there. And in the United States, we have two instant payment rails. One is called RTP by the clearinghouse, and the second one we just got introduced is a FedNow, and everyone is excited about it. And I can see why the community is excited about it. So we Dropp as a payment platform, we offer instant payments. So, and I've mentioned this several times on your show, that we've been working with the financial institutions, specifically banks, to enable RTP. We have shared our product with the clearinghouse, which has had real-time payments since 2017. And then we also shared our platform with the Fed, specifically the FedNow team, in March. And it's a slow process, it's a long process, and they were excited about it. The product looks really good. So let me just tell you what the issue is with all these real-time payment infrastructure all over the world. They're incredibly fast. They do real-time settlement of fiat currencies, but they're just rails. You need all the payment capability, you need the user experience, you need all of that stuff to make payments happen. So when you do digital shopping or you do any shopping, all of that experience that you have and all of the experience that the merchant has, that has to be all built. So we built all of that so that you could have real-time payments. So we've been in conversation with banks to enable RTP and then now to enable FedNow. And we were fortunate enough in March, in the month of March, when we showed the product, the FedNow team liked it and they said, we would like to showcase your product, which happened, I think, last week. We wanted to make an announcement once we are live with that product as opposed to just being showcased in it. And I think one of the Hedera community members saw it and it got wildly excited. We are very excited. I think this is the future. The future is instant payments, and you should be able to make the payments, whether it's digital currency or you want to make it using US dollar or any currency, you should be able to do that. We are at the forefront of that. So using Hedera's extremely cost-effective distributed ledger technology, and now with the FedNow and the clearinghouse RTP protocol, very soon you'll be able to make payments using Dropp instantaneously. Right now in Dropp, you use ACH. Like when you fund your account, you use ACH. So it takes a day or two. And that's fine for now, but the entire world is moving in this direction of instant payments. And we want to have Dropp bring that to everyone so that you can make simple everyday purchases using Dropp. That's the idea.
So a quick question. You knew that you were going to be showcased. You're in works with FedNow to actually be integrated and allow the users of FedNow to use Dropp. Yeah. But did you know it was going to be announced or showcased so early?
No, we didn't. I mean, so let me also explain the showcasing part. The showcasing is the FedNow team is also interested in showcasing products like Dropp because you're really enabling. You're really not just building the rails again. You're giving them the consumers and the merchants tools by which they can actually use FedNow. So they are also excited and they showcase. We didn't know the timing of it, so they showcase it. Now, what we're working on, which is a really important aspect of it, and is the financial institutions with whom we are working. They have to enable it so that we can enable it. So it's going to take a while. People need to be a little bit patient. As you understand, FedNow also just came out a couple of months back. It's still young. And there's a lot of testing. There's a lot that needs to happen. Forget testing is beyond. There's a lot that needs to happen before you go out. So it could be end of the year. It could be next quarter, next year, first quarter next year. We'll be launching. We might first launch simple use cases. So when you download Dropp, maybe it will only be for merchants so that they can get their payments instantly. And then we might go take the next step where you as a consumer, you walk into a restaurant and you want to make $100 payment right through your bank account through Dropp. You could do that. You will be able to do that. So it's step 1, step 2, but this is a good start. We're very excited. And we also, I'm really happy about the reception we got in the last 24 hours. It's good to see that people are looking forward to this because there's always a question mark. Do people really want instant payments? Looks like they do. So I think it's been good 24 hours for us.
Well, it's been well deserved. So can you tell us what we can expect from Dropp and the impact on Hedera moving forward from this and other integrations?
So there are two very direct impact, right? So the part of the product that people like in the financial industry, not the non-crypto industry, what they like about the Dropp product is we use digital signatures. For every payment is made by, even when you read your transaction, we use digital signatures. So what we do is when you open an account, you're really opening an account in the Hedera distributed ledger, right? So what you should see once we roll out these products to the banks is you'll see lots of accounts being opened. So the number of account opening will go up exponentially. And then every transaction is going to be a Hedera transaction. And now we use both. We use HTS and we use HCS, which is the consensus. So you should see an uptick in all of those transactions. And then we use all sorts of other services in Hedera. But I would say typically you should see a large amount of account opening, like very large account openings. And then you will see millions of transactions happening per day because that's what it is. Micropayments are all about small transactions, but a lot of them, right? And that's why platforms like Hedera are like absolutely perfect for payments because it's low maintenance. The cost of the transaction is very low. It just helps us a lot. This would not have been possible if we had used any other distributed ledger. So we are excited about that. You should see a large amount of traffic happening. One of the things that we are doing, Brandon, and which I missed out in my previous statement is, so we are working with financial institutions to enable, we call it instant payments, where whether we use FedNow or RTP will be decided by the platform itself, whatever is the most cost effective at that point. But we are also really enabling Dropp as a payment service in these banks. So then the banks can itself offer it to their merchants and their consumer as a payment method, right? So we should see a lot happening in the next 6 months as we get more and more tractions with these institutions.
Well, this is absolutely music to our ears. Sushil, again, thank you so much for swinging by today. But is there anything else you'd like to pass on before we let you go?
Well, we want to thank the community for the support. It's been really good. It's been overwhelming, actually. And I want people to just understand that we're not live yet. When we are live, we won't blindside. We'll let people know as we go live. But it's going to be a while. It takes a long time. It has taken us 2 years to get here. Okay, it takes a long time. It's different. So that's what it is. If we've been showcased on the FedNow because they would like to market us as a platform to be used for FedNow, we have to work with financial institutions to make it happen. So all of that thing, slowly it's getting there. Okay.
Well, Sushil, thank you again for stopping by and explaining it, and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So Zep, yeah, that pretty much says it all. I've been excited about Dropp. You know that micropayments are one of my favorite use cases within the Hedera ecosystem, and Dropp is just doing a fantastic job across the board. Any thoughts?
I mean, definitely. You know, I think Rob said in his Shark Bites, traditionally, you know, these legacy institutions like Mastercard, Visa, they look at a micropayment as $10. And then you look at Hedera and you see you can do stuff under $1, under 10, 50 cents, 10 cents. And it's just a seismic leap in the way that value can be transacted. And I think having a showcase like this and having, this kind of extra attention put on Dropp is just a massive bullish signal for the capability that they provide, but the Hashgraph as that infrastructure to provide that capability itself. And I'm super excited as that as a use case. I know that's one of your favorites for sure. And I'm very excited to see where Rob in particular takes us with that through the Hedera Enterprise program. I'd love to see what FPOS, because FPOS back in the day, of course, they did their micropayments proof of concept. So maybe maybe this is the start of something great there. And I don't actually know, I can't comment on that, but I know that Rob is one of our biggest beasts behind Hedera, and he's got his foot in the door fully there. So I'm excited to see where micropayments takes us, definitely.
Yeah, exciting times. And, even though we have our microcosm of the Hedera ecosystem that's growing all the time, there's plenty of stuff going on outside of that. So I caught up with George to give us an update on the regulatory front, on the legislative front, because there's been a lot of things happening. So let's catch up with George. Welcome back, George. I know you usually like to get into a disclaimer right off the beginning, so I just want to give you an opportunity to do that real quick.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Brandon. Thanks for having me back. So again, I may be a lawyer, but I'm not. You're a lawyer. Every time I come on and do one of these clips or segments, it's just me giving my opinion based on the topics that we're discussing.
Sure. Understood. So, George, the first thing I wanted to ask about is a motion to dismiss in the Terra Luna case. Now, the judge in that case rejected the motion, stating that the court rejects the approach recently adopted by another judge in that district. And of course, he was referring to the summary ruling by Judge Torres in the XRP case, which of course we celebrated. Now, you talked about last time how important the Southern District of New York is, but both of these judges are in the Southern District, so they both carry weight. But in your opinion, is this a setback for the altcoin industry? And if so, how much?
Yeah, so it's a good question. It took, the Judge Torres' decision was the law in the books, of at least in the Southern District, for a whole 3 weeks before Judge Rakoff brought it into question. So that wasn't fun. Definitely a little bit of a rain on our parade. However, I think the main benefit that we derived from the Torres decision was that it showed that, contrary to Gensler's position that the law is clear on this subject and we don't need any new legislation, that decision said it's not clear. At least one judge in a highly reputable court in Southern District disagrees and takes a different position than another judge in the same court. So it just shows that it's not clear, and we do need the legislature to step in here.
And that's exactly what we're seeing with my next question. We have continued murky waters as we've covered, on the judicial front, which leads us to this next story. The bipartisan support of the Financial Innovation and Technology for the 21st Century Act, which passed the House Financial Services Committee in a vote of 35 to 15. And that 35 that voted for it included Democrats. So we had bipartisan support for this. But in your opinion, what do you think of this overwhelming support for this bill? Is this good for our industry?
Yeah, look, this is the most comprehensive bill to be passed out of committee dealing with digital assets ever, right? So this is great. The fact that it got bipartisan support, icing on top, and bodes well for it actually getting out of the House. The bill is comprehensive. It's a great starting point. There are issues with it still, and hopefully through markups and different hearings, it'll get fixed. Where this goes from here, it's tough to tell, right? So I'm fairly confident that it'll get out the House, how it's met at the Senate, and ultimately by the White House. TBD, right? The White House has they've publicly said that they're not big fans of the industry, right? So if this bill is viewed as as favorable to the industry, it may not be viewed well by the White House.
Now that's a good point, but finally we do have some other good news this week, and I think it could impact this space as well. It's the plans for FedNow to leverage Dropp. Just for clarification, it's not a direct integration of Hedera within FedNow, and it's not an endorsement, of course, by the Federal Reserve of Hedera. But I think that's a distinction without a big difference here, because if the banks decide, as Sushil noted, Sushil is the CEO of Dropp. If they decide to use Dropp, we're still going to get those transactions. We're going to still get those accounts created. And of course, that's revenue for the network, which is what gets the community really excited. But the naysayers would have you believe, and you've already talked about a couple of them. We have Gary Gensler. We have the Elizabeth Warrens of the world, even Biden. They'd have you believe that there's no value being created within the crypto industry. And this would pretty much contradict that. How much do you think it helps our cause on the legislative and the regulatory fronts to have governmental institutions leveraging DLT technology, even if indirectly through service providers like Dropp?
Yeah, when that announcement came out, I had a nice giggle because I thought back to the president's economic report that came out in March, where he dedicated a full 2 chapters to the digital asset industry. And I pulled one chapter and one paragraph up that really stuck out. And I hate reading during one of these segments, but I think it's worth it. This is basically the summary. It says, indeed, crypto assets to date do not appear to offer investments with any fundamental value, nor do they act as an effective alternative to fiat money, improve financial inclusion, or make payments more efficient. Instead, their innovation has been mostly about creating artificial scarcity in order to support crypto assets prices, and many of them have no fundamental value. And it's funny. So this is the president's report, and then FedNow, which is the report goes on to say, like, by the way, all the innovation that was going to be brought about by the digital asset industry, which it hasn't accomplished any of them, we can do it as your government. We can do it, and we can do it better. Here comes FedNow, and maybe a CBDC. But so now the fact that FedNow is out, and to see them list as a service provider a company that provides value, obviously you would think that that's why they would list it there. That is underlying that value is the Hedera Hashgraph DLT. It's just funny to me. I think it does bode well for the industry in that it is showcasing kind of winners and losers, right? The ones that are actually out there building use cases, gaining adoption, it's undeniable, right? The others, not so much. So I do think that that distinction is there. I think it bodes well for the industry. It would be very interesting to see a situation in which the government comes after Hedera, but yet it's also using Hedera, right? It would be a quagmire that I think would cause pause for the regulator.
Yeah, and I think that's all it really would be. I think this is going to be a steamroller. Eventually, they're going to get this right. I think that Hedera is doing all the right things, and it's not just in the payment space. Of course, we're seeing things in supply chain. We're seeing things in environmental use cases, even healthcare and things along those lines. So as long as we keep adding these value-add use cases outside of speculation, it's just going to be good for us, and it's going to be good for the industry in general. But George, thank you so much for swinging by. I really like these conversations. I think it's good to get the insights from somebody who really understands both the regulation and the legislative fronts. But again, thanks for swinging by.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Brandon.
It's great to hear from George always. He has a wealth of experience behind him in the legal world, but he's also a hardcore HBAR baron as well. Like I send him news and he's always read it. Always read it. Like 5 minutes, at least it comes out and within 3 minutes he's seen it. He's at the forefront of reading that, and he lives and breathes it as well. So as always, it's great to hear his views there. And we have all of these kind of figures in our ecosystem. We've come from great places before, great companies before, and we only saw that again recently with the new chief open source officer at Hedera. So Andrew Aitken, who's taken on this role, he's the former open source head for the White House, I believe, and various other companies like Wipro. And I think for multiple reasons, this is interesting. From a marketing perspective, we've often been shouted at for not being open source. Of course, we are now, when the council voted to buy that patent from Swirlds, we know that we are now open source. The hash graph is open source. But to have someone at the figurehead of that who's really ramming that home every day of the week, I think is great. Sends a great indicator to the market that it's something that we really care about in our, fully road to decentralization. But also, currently, Swirlds is sort of the main maintainer of the hash graph. They've got a brilliant team. Don't get me wrong, we have some of the best minds operating that, the best minds upgrading that, and so on and so forth, maintaining it. But I think one of the key roles of the chief open source officer, Andrew Aitken, is to get as many builders in as possible to really, really capitalize on the fact it is open source. And so I've heard that not only is that people outside in the wider ecosystem, but also within our council. And our council have some of the best tech teams in the world. IBM co-authored the Hashgraph consensus algorithm. We've got Wipro, we've got Toyota, we've got some of the biggest companies in the world and some of the greatest tech teams at our fingertips. And I think his position there is really going to be activating those council members, getting them to start contributing to things like the HIP process. I mean, recently we've seen IBM get active again. To have that caliber alongside Swirlds, pushing Hashgraph as groundbreaking tech to make sure it's always up to date with what's going on, make sure it's always got the later feature set, make sure that it's always there, like you said, when we pull out our ace, so that we can pull out this ace each and every time. So I think a great move there, and I'm really excited to learn more.
Yeah, the collective team within the Hedera ecosystem is second to none. And of course, it starts with Mance and Lehman themselves, but we have people like Rob Allen, we have Brian Brooks, you go on down the line, and this is just another great addition. All right, so Zep, I was gone for 3 weeks and there was all kinds of news, and we need to cover some of this other stuff. And one thing that you wanted to hit on was Koora and MENA. Can you give us some update on exactly what's going on there?
Yeah, so Koora are the leading Arabic sports media platform in the MENA region. And the MENA region is the Middle East and North Africa. So a vast, vast expanse. And just a bit of history, when you look at Saudi Arabia, you look at the Middle East at the moment, they have gone absolutely all in on sport. We see them getting Premier League footballers at, $200 million salaries, quadrupling their wages. We saw what happened with the PGA. We've seen what's happening with F1. Every single sports franchise in the world that is on that global stage, which has a mega vast audience, is being targeted by the Middle East. And so to have the biggest Arabic sports media platform in that region team up with Sphera World, who are a football being the biggest sport in the world, they're a football experience on Hedera, leveraging Hedera NFTs with some of the biggest teams within their own region, which I'm sure will expand. But to see that combination of the biggest sports news media platform in that region, combined with a new football platform, which is the biggest sport in the world, combined with Hedera as this sort of golden trifecta, I think could be a massive activation for our NFT ecosystem. We're in the very early days. They came out with their trailer, I think, on August the 3rd. I know that Vignesh, who's the lead there, is very excited about it. So I myself am very excited for all of those reasons. I'm sure we'll learn more about it in the coming months.
Yeah, I mean, in the sports world, it's just hitting on all cylinders. We have, Karate Combat. We have everything that's going on with Own the Zone and the World Cup. We had just a few weeks ago the Tour de France and Road Code. It's just doing fantastic. But like you said, we're touching every industry, including healthcare. And Jim Nasr, who has been an HBAR baron from the very beginning, of course, they were highlighted by Coinbase several weeks ago. It just hasn't stopped. He continues to hit the road really hard, right?
Definitely. I mean, he's one of our OG HBAR variants and one that's been building this entire time. He says in the most recent video with Zenobia that he believes that Hedera consensus service as a tool is our USP. It's one of the greatest services we have, and within healthcare in particular, it's kind of the golden egg. So I advise everyone to go and watch that video. He takes us through exactly what the HCS can be worked for, exactly how it can facilitate and enable an industry like healthcare. He talks about how sort of balancing both, private on-chain or keeping data private on-chain, but also the workarounds to make sure that this sort of healthcare isn't completely open to the public, because, it's got to be private. It's got to have these privacy elements. So it's definitely worth watching. And again, a massive shout out to Jim for what he's doing. And, of course, Coinbase have seen that value. Hedera have seen that value. And I'm sure that the wind is very much in his sails at the moment.
And I think he's right. I think Hedera consensus service is very important. I think the rest of the industry is very confused around what the consensus service is. And I think I'm going to start to lobby to change the name to the Hedera notary service, the Hedera data logging service. We've said that a few times, but just because of the confusion we're seeing on what is a really important feature within the Hedera ecosystem, I think we could do some things to probably improve that. All right. So before we move on to network analysis, I wanted to get into the changes to staking. Of course, that's really top of mind on a lot of people's minds over the past few weeks because there has been a significant reduction. So the main bullet points are the maximum staking reward has been reduced to 2.5%, and that will be reduced if the total staked amount exceeds 6.5 billion HBAR or 13% of supply. We are above that level right now, so we're sitting at about 2.3%. So, Zep, I fully understand that people get frustrated once they've had something when it gets taken away. But I think over the past year with the staking rewards at 6.5%, we can just consider that a hat tip because it really was unsustainable, at least with what the network is doing right now. But we also have to take a look at other asset classes and what their yields look like. So the S&P 500, its yield is about 1.5%. The 10-year treasury in the United States, or the benchmark bond in the United States, it's at 4.2%. But that's the highest it's been over the past decade and a half. So this is really more in line with those, but the potential for appreciation of the HBAR itself kind of puts it more in line with, tech stocks, high-flying tech stocks, and they never give out dividends. So this really is a bonus, and, it's going to make it more sustainable in the long run, and hopefully that could get bumped up later on if the network justifies it with the fees that they're generating. All right, Zep, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into some network analysis. So over the past 24 hours, we're at 113 million transactions with an average TPS of 1,300 and a max TPS of 6,400. Now, if we shift over to the past week, we have a max TPS, and I think this might be a record or very close to it, of 10,700 transactions in a single second. But I think the real excitement has to do with the time to consensus, the time to finality, and it is under 4 seconds. And the reason that is because Hedera just had a network upgrade and they have redeployed the improved gossip protocol. Now, they've made some significant tweaks from the last time we covered it, but I did an interview with the guys the first time they deployed it, and they removed it because it was causing some volatility. And again, there should be some tweaks that have been made in between then and now, but I think this will give everybody a pretty good idea of what this new gossip protocol does. Lazar, it's been noticed since the Hedera network update last Thursday that the average time to consensus has dropped significantly. What's changed?
Well, a lot actually. We replaced the whole gossip algorithm completely with a completely new algorithm. And it's an algorithm we are still refining, so we can even expect even more drops in the future.
Oh, awesome. Cody, do you have anything you'd like to add?
It's just really exciting to see this go live. This is something we've been talking about internally for a year. We've had the code written for many, many months. And it just takes so long to test and get confidence that it's going to be robust when we actually deploy it. So really excited to see it working in practice.
Absolutely. So since this upgrade, we've seen a very large use case come online, and there's been increased volatility in the time to consensus, albeit around a very low average. Can you give us some insight about what we're seeing there?
We are definitely monitoring the increased volatility and time to finality. At the time, we don't think it's related to the increased volume. This is a very big coincidence. We turned on the new algorithm. There are still some rough edges. We saw the volatility, and a few hours later, the high TPS suddenly turned on from Atma.io. So it's definitely something we're aware of and we're monitoring, and we do expect to address that in future updates, hopefully very soon.
Good to hear. So, Lazar, this is an improvement to the Gossip protocol, not to be confused with part of Hedera's secret sauce, Gossip about Gossip. From my understanding, most DLTs use Gossip protocols. So, could this improvement help the entire space, or is it just applicable to Hashgraph?
Unfortunately, one of the downsides of this job is that there is so much stuff going on in Hedera, I don't have enough time to actually get myself familiar with other Gossip protocols of other DLTs. But what I can say that our Gossip protocol is probably more well suited for graph-based DLTs. So maybe blockchain-based DLTs might not make use of this algorithm, but maybe some graph-based ones could.
I understand. That's awesome. So you guys are working on the core Hashgraph algorithm. It sounds like you have some really exciting things coming in the future. I hope we can get you back when you start to implement them.
Well, I would like to be back.
Of course. Thank you.
And we should bring Kelly next time as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely. Sounds good. Thank you again for coming.
All right. Thanks.
So Zeb, this is the kind of innovation that we love to see going on in the space, and to improve it by over a second compared to what we were seeing before, that's a massive improvement. But we're also seeing some impressive metrics come out of the account creation. What are we seeing there?
Yeah, so in the last week, we've seen nearly 80,000 new accounts created. And in the last 3 days, accounts are about 60,000 of those. I've seen some people in Reddit, I've seen some people in Telegram saying that they think it might be because of the airdrop that Slime World did. Some others have said they think it's from the Play OTZ with the FIFA World Cup shouting it out. So at the moment, there seems to be a few different options. But either way, someone is stacking up the accounts. And of course, that's a great indicator for all of us.
Yeah, no question about that. Moving on down to our fungible tokens. Wrapped HBAR is at the top. The meme token 0 is in number 2. We have Energy Trade token. We have Sauce, Dovu, USDC, XSauce, USDC, HeliSwap, and Nada all rounding out that top 10. Just showing that in general, our DeFi ecosystem's doing pretty darn well. And moving on down to our NFTs, we have DADAZ, which is an art exhibition. And I went to the website where it's being featured, and it looks really impressive. We have another one that's Hello Future related. We have Pepe. Of course, the most held NFT, the Hashpack Backpack, that's in the top 10. We have Tiny Toys, 2 of the NFTs that are associated with Karateka, which of course uses the Karate Combat branding. And Dead Pixels, Hangry Barboons, and Earthlings round out that top 10. And Zeb, the other thing when it comes to NFTs is Brandon D. He's been working really hard in the music NFT space, and he put out some information. He put out a clip of one of his music NFTs, and I'm going to play it here at the end. But I just love what they're doing. This innovation that's taking place in the space is just really impressive. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think one thing that it really highlights for me is just how sort of vast a single NFT on Hedera can be. How many different file types it can support. So this Hello Future NFT, it has the Hello Future Anthem, which is the actual song, which is an MP3. It has the album cover, which is a PNG. It has a 3D vinyl, which is a GLB file. And then it also has the music video as an MP4. And all of that comes under one NFT. So rather than just getting an NFT and getting an image, you really are getting the bang for your buck. And to know that Hedera can, host that many different files really, really opens up the utility for that. And I know that the Brandon Patches and a few others are really pushing through a new music hip at the moment. I know it's been passed, so I think it's waiting for that integration. And as I understand, that's going to be a real big deal for them. So excited for that and what they do with it.
Yeah, I want to get Brandon on as soon as possible because he's doing some amazing work. But with that, let's go ahead and get into some DeFi. Taking a look at DeFi Llama, not including state or liquid staking, the total value locked in the Hedera DeFi ecosystem stands at $32.47 million. SaucerSwap takes up over $28 million of that, even overtaking Stater at this point. HeliSwap is the number 2 DEX with $3.7 million, and Pangolin has fallen to about $500,000. Not financial advice, but DeFi is where you can make up for some of those lost staking gains. We'll look at the farming rewards on some of SaucerSwap's popular trading pairs as an example. HBAR X is at 8%, 31% on HBAR Sauce, 60% on HBAR USDC, and 38% on HBAR Karate. And considering all the news around HBAR and Calaxy, you can get 25% on the HBAR Calaxy pair. Over on HeliSwap, we have 7% on HBAR X, 74% on HBAR and their native token Heli, 37% on HBAR USDC, and 40% on HBAR Karate. Now let's move on to the HBAR and crypto markets. On the macro front, there are fears of economic slowdowns in Russia and China, which investors fear could impact the world economy. In addition, inflation didn't drop as much as expected last week, which may cause the Fed to stay hawkish. Finally, it went viral that investor of Big Short fame Michael Burry took out a massive options position betting on a market crash. Though I've seen Barry be wrong on several occasions since his correct call on the housing market in 2008, this confluence of factors has caused a risk-off environment in risk assets this week. And crypto has been especially hard hit. Bitcoin and Ethereum are both down about 10% this week. XRP is off about 20%, with most altcoins falling in that range. HBAR, which is sitting at about 5.7 cents at the time of recording, is up 2% on the week and is a major outlier. And this is thanks to the FedNow Dropp news covered earlier. Though well off its high earlier in the week, the outperformance is still nice to see. I'd keep an eye on this trend line, currently at about 5.4 cents for support and 6 cents as the next area of resistance. All right, Zeb, that's pretty much all we have. Is there anything else you'd like to pass on?
I mean, I don't think we can actually comprehend how massive the last 3 weeks are. You know, every time I come on here, I'm very excited, and I always say that, you know, amazing things are happening because they are. But this last 3 weeks have just blown anything we've seen out of the water in terms of genuine public exposure, mainnet activity, and so on. We've seen Hyundai come out with Kia, you know, the biggest car manufacturer in South Korea, come out with their own carbon emission use case. We've seen, you know, the biggest financial institution in Taiwan come out with Shinhan and then have that showcased by Standard Bank, the largest bank in Africa. We've seen, you know, the news with FedNow and Dropp, you know, micropayments. We've seen so many different institutions from all over the globe all come together. We've even seen the NFTs get picked up by FIFA. You know, we've seen Koora, the biggest sports media organization within the MENA region. It's like we have a behemoth on each side in each industry that all have their foot in the Hedera door. And now we're seeing that ace come out, which we touched on at the beginning of the show, which is we have utility that can cover everything. And the more of these blueprints we put out, the more of these use cases we put out, that is only going to expand. You lay a blueprint, an institution can see it, pick it up, mold it to their own devices. And I think that really is what we're seeing the start of. And like you've said many times before, it's that hockey stick trajectory. And it feels like in terms of institutional adoption, we're seeing that now. And then with the institutions, with the attention, hopefully that then trickles down to our retail economy. And then we see the same thing happen to retail. So it's like institutions first, trickle down, retail up as well. And I really think we're at the start of that. So exciting days ahead for sure.
Well, I think this is just the end of the beginning, right? This is where we've built a lot of the infrastructure where the things can start to leverage off of each other. We hear Brady talking about the flywheel effect, and that's what we're starting to see. So next week, we're going to get Earthlings back on. I'm going to try to get a Twitter space together for Fresh Supply Co., so that's going to be exciting. But I want to close this out with Brandon's song. It is absolutely fantastic, so check it out.
Hello, future. I see you coming round. Are you ready? 'Cause it's going down. Hold on, steady. We're lifting off the ground. You know already. Our new kids in town. DeFi